I came from the country, grew up on a farm, so I knew a bit about growing up on the land and so forth. But then when I was 10, we headed to the city, Sydney. It took me 27 years or so, or till I was around 27, to get sick and tired of the city and head out back into the country. And I was a bit disillusioned with city life and the struggle of getting from one place to the other. And I'd been told about a person called Robert Rosen in northern New South Wales, and I was heading in that direction anyway. And I went to visit him, and turned out that Robert was one of the pioneers of ethical investment in Australia. And he just introduced me to his library of books on ethical investment and permaculture and social change. And I'd actually been trained as a journalist. I'd done a Bachelor of Arts in communications, but never really felt inspired to become part of the mainstream media. So when I met Robert Rosen, he invited me to the Earth Bank conference in Sydney, so I went back down to Sydney to that, and that's when I discovered a whole world of positive social change and met permaculturists like Robin Francis and Jill Jordan and a whole bunch of other people, and I went, okay, now I've got something that I really want to write about. So that's how I got into it, and it was a couple of years after that that I moved permanently to northern New South Wales up near Lismore, and I reconnected with Robin Francis, who's one of the pioneers and leading lights of permaculture still today, and she was editing the Permaculture International Journal, and I joined her and a team of others to take over the editing of the Permaculture International Journal, and ended up doing that for about 8 years. And that was fantastic because I got to go to permaculture conferences and hear Bill Mollison, David Holmgren and all these people speaking and talking, and visit projects around the country. I had all these frustrations about how the world operated inefficiently, and I didn't really know what to do about it. I didn't have the ideas. So when I came across permaculture, I thought, okay, here's it created a big picture, but it also created a design system and ideas as to how to implement a better way of living, under those ethics of care for the earth and care for people, which are fundamental. So I know there's just so much energy there with the people as well, and everything just seemed to click into place. The ethical investment, the sort of sustainable food production, and I suppose I was excited as much by those concepts of community development, ethical investment and social change as I was about the food production side, because I had come into it as a journalist, I suppose, more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And that's how I stayed, really. Now after 20 years almost of being involved in permaculture, I can see the strengths and weaknesses that are there. I was, like a lot of people, initially doing a permaculture design course. I was overwhelmed. How am I going to incorporate this into my life? And I don't think I ever successfully achieved that. I think, but so there's that tremendous inspiration and excitement, and I think most people doing a permaculture design course feel that if they hadn't been involved or introduced to the ideas of permaculture before. I think there's a lot of experienced, obviously, architects, professionals who are a bit more mature about things, who come into it with just looking for a broader way of looking at the world. So excitement, inspiration, but as a reporter, I suppose, and a recorder of the movement in the Permaculture Journal, I saw a lot of enthusiasm for projects in Australia and around the world that looked fantastic, but then fizzled out into nothing because the key person behind it or the energy behind it or the planning behind it wasn't thorough enough. And so I think a downside of permaculture was that a lot of projects and a lot of energy went into things that weren't actually sustainable, which was what the whole concept was talking about, sustainability. And a lot of times what was talked about wasn't actually put into practice. I think another aspect of it, of permaculture, is that it didn't really, even though it was supposed to be about sustainable food production as much as anything else, I didn't see a big focus on food production. And I think that it would have been good if permaculture had linked up with the organic gardening and farming movement much more closely throughout its development. In fact, Bill Mollison, the co-founder of permaculture, and Peter Cundall, one of the leading organic gardeners in Australia, met in Bill Mollison's office in Tasmania many, many years ago to form one of the first organic gardening groups in Australia. And I just would have loved to have seen them stick together more, because I think permaculturists needed to produce more food and know how to garden, including me. And I think that the organic gardeners and farmers could have done with the broader ideas and vision of permaculture to see how they fitted into the world and how they were actually a part of fundamental change, because that's where it comes from, growing the food and producing food yourself. That's the number one thing that I've learnt now. So yeah, fantastic enthusiasm from permaculture, great ideas, often badly implemented. But now that I've come round to not being, in the last 10 years I've been editing the Organic Gardener magazine in a more mainstream way and not as involved at all in permaculture, I can see now that I've come back round, and my disillusionment about some aspects of permaculture is I don't care so much anymore, because I think that I see community gardening taking off around the country, if not around the world. City farms, community gardens, I think permaculture is a really big part of that. I think they're a really big part of ethical investment, which is now mainstream. So many aspects of sustainability, I think, that we wrote about and talked about in the Permaculture Journal, I see them taken up. And I'm not saying permaculture is totally responsible for that at all, but it was a big part of it. So now I'm going, well, you know what? I think it really did, create significant and important change.